This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 2. The Assassination of Julius Caesar, the Assassination of Antipater, and the Aftermath. After a nearly 500-year period of the Roman Republic and the recent defeat of Pompey, Julius Caesar consolidated power and ensured that he was proclaimed dictator for life. The Senate could not let such an affront stand, and they were offended at the arrogance of such an act. More than 36 senators formed a pact and assassinated Julius Caesar on March 15th, 44 BCE. Thus began a long period of retribution and more civil wars. Caesar's will was read, and Mark Antony, who considered himself Caesar's best friend, was not named. Instead, Julius Caesar had named his nephew Octavian as his heir, and according to the will, if Octavian had not been alive, the next in line would have been Brutus, the same who took part in the conspiracy to assassinate him. So now, Octavian allied with Mark Antony and Mark Lepidus to form a three-man rule known as a triumvirate, which had as its primary goal to avenge the death of Octavian's uncle and adoptive father, Julius Caesar. Caesar had been well disposed toward the Jews, who wept openly at his funeral in Rome. Now they wondered, who would be his successor, and what would that mean? But in Judea, with Caesar out of the picture, Antipater was poisoned by a political rival and died at about the age of 70 in 43 BCE. Herod, Antipater's son, who had been ruling Galilee, took this opening to marry the Hasmonean princess Mariamne and thus consolidate power. The triumvirate of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Mark Lepidus ruled Rome for 2 5-year terms, from 44 to 34 BCE, before its members eventually turned on one another. During the first 5-year triumvirate, Mark Antony and Octavian finally and decisively defeated the forces of Brutus and Cassius on the plains near Philippi in October of 42 BCE. They took the opportunity to clean up other administrative affairs as well. They nominated Herod to be king of Judea, which was confirmed by the Senate in 40 BCE. To confirm his alliance with Octavian, Mark Antony took as his fourth wife Octavian's sister, Octavia the Younger. From that union would come 2 daughters, Antonia the Elder and Antonia the Younger. At about the conclusion of the first 5-year mark of the triumvirate, on October 30th, 39 BCE, Rome was beginning to experience at least some peace. Those who had fought on behalf of Caesar's assassins were given clemency and welcome to return to Rome. One such couple was Tiberius Claudius Nero and his wife, the 19-year-old Livia Drusilla. Not only her husband, but Livia's father had also opposed Caesar. He had joined with the assassins, but committed suicide in 42 after the Battle of Philippi. With the couple now back in Rome thanks to clemency, Livia captured the attention of Octavian, who quickly fell in love with her. Problem was, Octavian was already married to his second wife, Scribonia, who was pregnant with their first child, and Livia and her husband had a young toddler, Tiberius, and Livia was pregnant with their second son. None of that mattered to 25-year-old Octavian, who convinced Livia to divorce her husband and to marry him. So on the very day that Octavian's wife, Scribonia, gave birth to their only child, Julia, he divorced her, because, as he said, he was, quote, unable to put up with her shrewish disposition. Instead, he married Livia Drusilla. Livia gave birth to her second son, Nero Claudius Drusus, on January 14th, 38 BCE, and was married to Octavian 3 days later. At the ceremony, her divorced husband gave her to Octavian, just as a father would. Not only that, but shortly after Scribonia gave birth to Julia, Octavian, as father and as allowed by Roman custom, claimed complete parental control and took Julia from her mother. This is likely why he remained married to her until she gave birth, so he could legally claim his daughter. Together, Octavian and Livia would have no children, only one stillbirth. So Octavian was father to Julia by Scribonia, and he adopted Livia's two boys, the toddler Tiberius and the newborn Nero Claudius Drusus, who would come to be known as Drusus the Elder. After the wedding, Livia made a visit to her villa, north of Rome, about 16 kilometers. On that visit, she saw an eagle flying by, and it dropped a hen, alive, into her lap, which it had just snatched up. Livia even noticed a sprig of laurel in its beak. She kept the hen for breeding and planted the laurel. Soon the hen reared so many chickens that the villa became known as the Villa of the Hens, or sometimes the Poultry. Even more, the planted laurel took root and grew vigorously. Eventually, many cuttings were made and multiple laurels grew around the villa. And as we'll see, even decades later, Caesars used laurel from that bush for their wreaths and triumphs. For Herod, after having been successfully named king and then confirmed by the Senate, it was time for him to leave Rome and take control of his kingdom. He would rule Judea from 37 to 4 BCE, and as such, he would be one of the longest-serving and most consequential rulers of that land in decades. While Roman civil wars had been raging, the Parthians, regular antagonists of Rome, opportunistically supported a certain Hasmonean priest by the name of Antigonus. The Parthian Empire's western border, in effect, jutted up against Rome's eastern border. The province of Syria and the kingdom of Judea were meant by Rome to be a buffer against the Parthians. So when Herod entered Jerusalem in the summer of 37 BCE, he did so with the help of a Roman army. Herod walked into the city that had been devastated by Roman catapults and legions for 55 days. He removed the priest Antigonus, who had been functioning as ruler, and gave a large sum of money to Mark Antony to see to it that Antigonus was beheaded, a humiliation suffered by no other king under Roman rule. In the end, Mark Antony crucified Antigonus and whipped him while he was being crucified. After this public spectacle, he then slit his throat. Such indignities had never been suffered by a defeated king at the hands of the Romans, but it speaks to the power that Herod enjoyed and the friendly relations that he had with both Octavian and Mark Antony. Though Jerusalem had been devastated, Herod quickly began to rebuild it and make it even more grand. He built the fortress Antonia, named after Mark Antony, in the mid-30s BCE, and just outside the city, he built a theater in Abu Tor and an amphitheater in the Kidron Valley. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa was a childhood friend and close ally of Octavian. They were the same age. The bond between them was solidified in their teenage years when Octavian interceded on behalf of Agrippa's brother to Julius Caesar himself. Agrippa's brother Lucius had fought against Julius Caesar, siding with Pompey. Lucius had been pardoned once before, and though Caesar had well-known reputation for clemency, it was understood that clemency was offered once only. Any second violation would be met with death. As this was Lucius's second offense, he awaited his forthcoming execution. Marcus Agrippa talked over the predicament with Octavian, asking that he intercede before Julius Caesar himself. The young Octavian was reluctant to do so, as he had not asked his uncle for any favors prior to this, and he knew the policy for repeat offenders, as Lucius certainly was. But he mustered up courage and made the request, due to his friendship with Marcus Agrippa. Julius Caesar granted the request, and Agrippa's bond with Octavian was secured even more firmly. So in 36 BCE, Marcus Agrippa betrothed his newborn daughter Vipsania to 6-year-old Tiberius, Octavian's stepson by Livia. With Octavian as his friend, Marcus Agrippa served as his loyal and capable lieutenant. As stated earlier, the triumvirate of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus would come to an end when the parties eventually turned on one another. First, Lepidus was exiled in 36 BCE. Mark Antony had married Cleopatra of Egypt as his 5th wife, and their combined forces were defeated by Octavians, led by Marcus Agrippa, at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Shortly after their defeat, Mark Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, where they both committed suicide. Caesarion, the 16-year-old love child of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, was also hunted down and killed. Marcus Agrippa, already a close friend, ally, and lieutenant of Octavian, cemented that position with the victory at Actium. Even more, the victory over Antony and Cleopatra made Egypt an imperial province rather than a senatorial province, meaning it was controlled directly by Octavian. Next week, we'll learn more about the affairs in Judea and other goings-on in Rome, how Octavian was declared Augustus and led the empire to the Augustan peace.